Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an excellent game to share with you from 1973 on the white edge Boris Spassky playing against Mikhail Tal. Okay, we have on board a Nimzo-Indian defense. Bishop g5 is the Leningrad variation. It's given a kick back. Black's a moment away from breaking the pin now on the knight. c5, challenging the duo, opening a lane for the queen. d5, and now on this move 6, b5. This is the Averbakh Gambit, very close relative to the Blumenfeld Gambit. In the Blumenfeld Gambit, this guy will not be as active, won't be pinning the knight. He'll still be back here behind the c5 pawn. But in this line here, Nimzo-Indian, it's clearly out and about. White continues with a capture on e6, giving up the d5 pawn. Take towards the center naturally. And he picks up the b pawn. So now this is starting to look like a very dangerous pawn center, sort of 3-on-1. And nearby for black is d4. White is 4 moves away from castles. Black is just 1. So probably not a wise decision for white to try and do something about this pin with a3. An emphasis here is being placed on Kingside development. e3 on board. Black continues here with castles. If instead black goes straight in for this pressure on c3, it's poorly timed because white can take on f6. And after this recapture, there's really a big question mark that would hover over the black king. Where's the safe home for this guy? With the g-pawn no longer around? No safe haven for black if this pawn has to end up on f6. So it is first castles. Knight f3, and now that the rook is defending the knight, the queen feels much more comfortable applying pressure to c3. And right around the corner for black, now that the knight is unpinned, is knight e4, adding more pressure to c3. White says, not so fast, swipes the knight before that's possible, and defends c3 with queen d2. And now we have a6, so sort of Benko Gambit-like play as well. Blumenfeld Gambit, Benko Gambit move now with a3, pulling away the b-pawn, and we don't have a simple recapture here. The plan is still to focus on these dark squares. So as soon as this recapture is in there, c6 is now available. The queen knight has access to its favorite square, hops right to it, and now d4 is supported. Follow up here, bishop e2, d4. Acting fast, still trying to do something along this diagonal. One move out from castles, but what are you doing about c3, Team White? We have the capture on d4. And now, move 15. I wonder if you can spot what Tal's next move is. Feel free to pause the video. Okay, Tal continues here with an exchange sacrifice. He takes the knight. Not the only way to play it. You could also approach it where you capture a couple times on d4, and then you have this bishop c5 into f2 with check. Or, in this position, if you want to try and convince your opponent that you're a genius, you can take on f2 with the rook. Really flashy move. King takes rook, you're going to win the queen. And then queen takes rook, you're winning this knight. Take back, the queen's going to track down the rook in the corner. You're winning the b2 pawn next. It's a winning position for black. Now, word of caution, if you are going to go in for a flashy move like this, you really do have to do your homework. There's more to figure out after bishop to f3 from this position. I do include the PGN in the description if you're interested in working this position out further. In any case, in our game, it's the exchange sacrifice. Now, sometimes I'll be asked a question in the comments, how far did player X calculate? And I believe In this game, Tal, before pulling off this exchange sacrifice, had to see at least to his 22nd move. And the reason I think this is because in many moves throughout, he finds himself in an only move position, where if he doesn't find it, he's going to be in a losing position. Additionally, White has some follow-up moves that are quite forceful, taking advantage of some weak points in Black's camp. We're going to see that Tal goes in this game from being an attacker to a defender, and then back to an attacker. Okay. Follow-up here, bishop takes. Very active post. Knight is under fire. Knight is also pinned to the rook. Follow-up here, capture on d4. No time for White to track down the knight. White continues in the best way with castles. If bishop captures knight here, pawn takes knight. White is lost. What are you supposed to do? You take the pawn, you're going to lose the queen. And if you move the queen, you're going to lose the rook. That's a discovered check. So, no time to take the knight. Finally, in this game, White is castled. No problems for the king. For now. Let's finish up this sequence here. Winning the knight, winning the pawn, but now it's White who goes on the offensive. Tal has to put on his defensive cap. How to deal with this pressure now against c6. Hit twice, defended 0, and it's in a pin. Rook takes A, bishop takes knight, White is up the exchange, and now we have bishop b4. Where's this queen supposed to go? There's no queen move now where she can still defend the bishop. So queen goes on the offensive, hits this vulnerable point. Bishop's pinned, unprotected, Black is there, getting the bishop and defending. We're not done yet, however. After rook a to c1, I believe it was right about this point here, Tal had to see again this defensive move. You can't simply exchange rooks in this position. Tal plays bishop c5. The rooks are preserved. And this rook is preserved. If you exchange rooks, this bishop will end up lost. Winning position for White. So it's bishop c5. Game continues with rook c2, queen a4, and queen b3 is played here. No time for White to go in on the c file, doubling up, working on this pin, because Black would have this tactic. Bishop captures f2. In fact, this shot is available in many lines from this point on. And eventually, we end up seeing it played in the game. This unleashes an attack on c2. Black is winning here. So no rook f to c1. It's queen b3 in this game. Black cannot afford to exchange queens. Plays queen f4 here. If you exchange queens, yep, this bishop is going to be tracked down shortly. b4 is already a threat. Let's say bishop b7 in this position. After the rooks are doubled, White will soon win the bishop. A fancy check here is not working out for Black. Healthy structure, b pawn here. This is a winning position for White. Okay, in this game the queens are preserved. White insists on the queen exchange. Declined. Queen g3 actually turns out to be the losing move. What's considered best here is to produce a flight square with h3, suggesting bishop d7 and some line like this. The rook ends up pinning the bishop and the king comes out to f7. Still prefers Black at the end of that. All right, White does not play in the best way. It is queen g3 here. Queens yet again are preserved. The queen goes to f5 here. Now, I tested out yet again a queen exchange in this case, and it's actually not winning for white with a queen exchange. And you may find this instructive here. I know I did in testing this line out. If black goes in for the queen exchange and then tries bishop b7, a moment away from getting out of this pin now, it would no longer be winning. With this slightly different structure and working with a passed A pawn rather than a B pawn, it says black can hold this. And I think a big reason for this is this blockade square on A3. Very difficult to get the A pawn rolling. And notice from A3, it always has this target, this half-dead pawn, very weakened kingside structure in this case. So these are the two big reasons when you compare this endgame here without the queens to the previous one, where there was a B pawn and these guys on the king side were straightened out. It says you can hold this here for black in this case. Okay. In any event, the queen exchange declined, white doubles, and we continue here with the bishop b7. Now, this trick on f2 would not be working. The queen can take, and c2 is secure. Okay. In the game, it is bishop b7. Now, before you can play, before Tal played bishop b7, he had to calculate this check on b8. In the game, queen f3 is played. If white goes in for this fork on b8, landing a check, tracking down the bishop, now this shot on f2 would be there. Black wins c2 next. Or, if you take the bishop, black would soon be winning the king. Rook takes rook, checkmate next move. Okay, white does not play. Queen b8, queen f3 it is. Nope, no queen exchange still. She has an eye on c1 and g2. The queen is functioning like a queen. She's coordinating indirectly with the rook on c1 and the bishop on g2. From here, queen b3, bishop's under fire, rook c7 is played here, bishop a8, there's queen b8, tracking the bishop. Rook c7 here. e6 is up for grabs with check. White doesn't take it, he plays g3 here. If white takes on e6, you could move the king or even bring the rook over here, getting out of this pin and focusing on the f2. And still this g2 square, there is a mate threatened on g2 now. In the case of g3 in this position, yet again, there's a tactic on f2. King f1, you can put the bishop on e3, next winning the rook. Winning position for Team Black. All right, white does not take the pawn in this position. Plays g3, defending the mate. Move 29. Finally, we see that tactic on f2. He's pulling the king out to the center with this sacrifice. These three pieces will be enough to hunt the white king. Now, in general, where do you think the black queen would function best? On what square? And, if you kind of close your eyes and picture that square, how might you describe it? Here's how I see it. I think in general, the queen being posted on one of the center squares would be best. Right? She has a lot of options on these center squares in this opened position. But I think we could be a little bit more specific and say, you know what? Of the four center squares, I think one of these two would be best. They're in white's house. A difference between these two squares compared to these two, the queen, when posted on one of these two squares, does eye up 3 back rank squares. You only get 2 when the queen is on one of these two. So slightly more active, a bit more invasive. And if we go just a hair further, trying to narrow it down a bit more, I think the queen would function best on a dark square, coordinated with the light square bishop. Queen has dark, bishop has light, although there is certainly an argument for having the queen on a light square, forming a battery along this diagonal. But in general, I think having both color complexes covered is a good idea, and it's going to go a long way as black pursues this white king. Okay, from here, queen f6 with an eye on d4, king e1 is played in this game. If the king goes to g1, black can continue with the check, king f1, another check, the king is pulled towards the center. Okay, so there's no hiding if the king tries to go to g1, in other words. In this game, it is king e1, queen e5 check, no time for blocks, the rook would fall, king f1, bishop check, king g1, queen d4 check, still no blocks, rook falls, king g2, another check on e4. White continues here with king g1. If he tries to hide on h3, that's not going to work because black can exchange on c2. If rook takes rook, bishop f1 is soon going to lead to mate. White would only have a block, bishop captures rook for mate. So I should point out, as soon as the king is on h3, it now has no moves. It's really living on the edge here, all of these covered. Also, one tweak to this variation, if the queen recaptures here on c2, you would yet again have this bishop f1 check. The rook is overloaded. Rook takes bishop, queen takes queen. Okay, in this game, the king does not try the h3 square. g1 it is. And now black coordinates on this diagonal. He will be getting into h1. There's no time to take the rook. There'd be mate on g2. It's really bad for white here, suggesting queen takes bishop as one of the best moves, giving up the queen. Spassky plays it with h4, good as any, I guess. Queen h1 check, king f2, rook check, king pulled in the direction we want him, right in the center. Just one more move now, queen e4, and white resigns. If the game continued, what are you supposed to do? A queen block, king moves. Let's touch on each of them briefly. Queen block, you can follow up with the check, another check, and the queen will be won next. If we consider a king move, one of these two, there's more than one way to approach it. A rook check on the d file, or going down to the f2 or f1 squares. If king d2, this is cool. Queen has to block now and you win the queen. The alternative, king c3, would lead to mate on d4. Finally, king d1, we could land a check on f1, f2, and now if the king goes to c3, we win the queen with the skewer. Or if the king goes to rank 1, we would have queen h1 for mate. All right, in this one though, after queen e4, Spassky resigns. So, what'd you think of this one? Anyhow, feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.